Hello, this is Foreign Policy Focus, episode 103, and I am the show's host, Kyle. In today's show, I'm going to be highlighting a bunch of news stories that have been going on the past week. For those of you who are regular listeners to the show, you'll know that I didn't get a show out on Monday. It was a holiday here. I had the day off and just didn't get around to it, unfortunately. Podcasting is still just kind of my, side gig right now, and so, it's not always going to get out, but I've done a pretty good job through the first 100 episodes, giving them out every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so keep on expecting them every week. I hope a lot of you subscribe to the show on iTunes. That's the easiest way to do it, I think, and most consistent way. That's the way I get most of my podcasting. If you want me out there on any other podcatchers, just email me and I could add them in, so long as it's free and whatnot. If you are thinking of subscribing on iTunes, give me a rating and review. You could also find the show online at foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com or on the homepage of the Libertarian Institute right under Scott Horton's show. The first thing I want to lead off with in today's show, and I will get around to all the news, but I think it's a good way to evaluate the news, just a good way to evaluate situations around the world, and this is brought up by Jason Ditz in an article he published in the Daily Caller. I will be sure to link to this article in the show notes page, but what Jason is kind of saying here is there are some things that you can prevent and some things that you can't prevent, looking at like hurricanes, earthquakes, natural disasters, stuff like that. I know when I was a kid that the tsunami was the big thing that killed, I don't know how many thousands and thousands and thousands of people. The numbers were unimaginable to me. I think I was in like second or third grade when that happened, and I just remember it being like unimaginable that many people had died from that event. But there's nothing anybody could have really done about it. I mean, it was an earthquake, the plates deep in the earth moving, and we're just these tiny humans living on the land. And so this is just kind of the reality of the situation. Hurricanes come through and knock out power, and unfortunately some people end up dying from those things. And there are all these small steps that people could do and should do at times to prevent those things, but resources among human beings are somewhat limited. And while it would be nice for every single person on the planet to have a backup generator in case their main power goes out and have access to the best medical care and best roads and best housing, most safe and durable shelter and all this kind of stuff, sometimes it just can't happen. And then there are disasters that are absolutely preventable. If you look, Jason Ditz points out back to the U.S. policy in Iraq during the 90s and then early 2000s, where the United States, I think, kind of essentially embargoed Iraq and didn't allow any kind of food and aid into the country that the country desperately needed. While the first Iraq war was very quick, it did take out a lot of Iraqi infrastructure that needed to be replaced that couldn't be replaced. The United States continued to bomb Iraq in several targets across the 90s and the Bill Clinton era, and this resulted in 500,000 children dying. And you had, of course, Madeleine Albright on TV famously saying that the price was worth it. And so that was preventable. People didn't have to do that. They made choices to do it. Several people made choices. Bill Clinton made the choice. Madeleine Albright made the choice. They made the conscious choice to kill hundreds of thousands of children in order to try to force the ruler of their country to do what they wanted. And that was absolutely preventable. What's going on right now in Yemen is absolutely preventable. If you look at the fact that hundreds of thousands, 775,000 Yemeni, 100,000 Yemeni have now contracted cholera, and aid organizations are estimating that up to 1 million Yemeni will contract cholera, and that, thousands of Yemeni are starving to death and being bombed to death by Saudi Arabia. It's a near genocide that really doesn't need to take place. This is all geopolitics. The United States is only assisting Saudi Arabia in their war against Yemen because the United States needed to placate Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia was worried about the United States moving diplomatically closer to Iran after the United States approved the Iran deal. And so when you look at even the foreign policy wins, even the really good wins like, preventing war with Iran, with the Iran nuclear deal, it comes with such consequences like the war in Yemen, the genocide in Yemen. Is it even worth it? Sometimes it's just amazing. So I thought that was a really powerful and important article, and Jason Ditz is a great guy. Everybody should check out his work at antiwar.com. I mean, he writes several good summary articles a day quite a few of those I will post on the news roundup a week. There's usually at least one a day, a story that I didn't catch anywhere, and Jason Ditz scooped up and did a real good job putting all the research together. And, I think Jason's a real good measure and does a real good job of only, really pushing the legitimate stories. And a lot of times in the foreign policy arena, there's rumors out there because it's only reported by Arabic news sources or Turkish news sources. And it really takes a lot of digging and verification and knowing people and asking them, hey, does this make sense? And what would you read to figure this out, to do all this work? So it's really important, and you should definitely check out his work. Another quick story I want to discuss, and it definitely would go in the category of preventable disasters, and that is the victims of the Iraqi burn pits. I talked about this in the past, but what happened during the second Iraq war is the United States had a whole bunch of garbage they needed to get rid of, and unlike what would happen in a normal place where, they're able to design the facilities needed to contain this kind of waste, which was human waste and human, like medical waste like arms and amputated limbs, Humvees, tires, fuels, disposed ammunition, I think some unexploded ammunition I read, just crazy amounts of stuff, and they put them all in these burn pits. Well, the burn pits had to be located very close to the base. Like I say, you can't drive it across the country to a dump. This is wartime in Iraq, and so they light up these burn pits here, and it just releases all these terrible things into the air, and I'm not gonna try to, explain, because I'm not a scientist, what all those things were, but you can absolutely read about it or watch it in this new documentary. So a lot of, now we have a lot of Iraq war victims that are coming down with cases of cancers and all these strange diseases, and, likely because of the toxins they inhaled near these burn pits. I'm sure there's, tons of Iraqis that are suffering the same deaths right now as well. The VA, which is already trash healthcare, is, kind of refusing to acknowledge these victims of the burn pits, saying, well, no, you can't prove that you got that in Iraq, and we didn't do that, and that was all above board. So they're not even getting help from the government. The government's not even doing what they said they would do for the veterans. And this is really one of the things that always upsets me, is that when the United States government, as much as they, will invoke the victims of these wars as the reasons they can never end, they will never treat the victims of these wars. They're not giving them adequate mental health care. They're not giving them adequate health care. They're not even recognizing a lot of the U.S. government doesn't even recognize a lot of the diseases that it causes, and it's all political. It's because if the United States admits it, then it creates a problem, because Americans hate cancer, right? Americans hate cancer more than they hate almost anything else. And so if United States, soldiers going to the Middle East means they're going to get cancer in their 40s, the wars might end. I mean, that might be a deal breaker for a lot of Americans. And so this is a really important story. And the new documentary is titled Delay, Deny, Hope They Die. The title is based on, I guess, kind of the view of the Congress that hopefully all these people are dead before you have to recognize it, because it's really painful to see, some of these cancers really, really, really distort and damage the human body. And they are absolute victims, and they are people who, because these cancers are so nasty, you could see the suffering that these people are going through. It's just so obvious and upfront that to say that, we're going to go send your son or daughter to fight in another war and to come back and end up like that, and we're not going to help them, that's unacceptable. So, that's the position of the politicians is, they never want to acknowledge it. Hopefully all these people die off, and then, one day they'll invoke a memorial and a monument to the brave fighters who died even after the war, or whatever nonsense they'll do to cover up their crime. So I got some news stretching back to last week. Last week, the Washington Free Beacon, I guess, broke, quote unquote, the story that Trump may withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. The Free Beacon used only unnamed sources, so take it at what you will. I've seen several other news outlets report that the Trump administration will, in fact, decertify the Iran nuclear deal. Because the Iran nuclear deal is not in the interest of the United States, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this podcast refuting that point, just because I've done it on past podcasts, and there's people who could do it a lot better than I can. So check out Scott Horn and Gareth Porter, not their most recent interview, but I believe 2 or 3 interviews ago, they covered just honestly, Scott Horn, Gareth Porter, Iran, Google it, you'll get tons of good content, and it will debunk Iran's nuclear program and that the nuclear deal is somehow bad and all the other garbage that went along with that. Getting along with Iran is absolutely not a bad thing, is the point. Speaking of getting along with Iran, one of the things we have going in the Middle East right now is a somewhat loose coalition between Turkey, Iran, and Iraq against the Kurdish populations of Syria, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. All three of these states, Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, have opposed their own Kurdish populations and have tried to suppress, freedom movements by their own Kurdish populations. Turkey has been fighting a 20-something year war against the PKK and the Turkish Kurds. Turkey also is fighting against the Syrian Kurds in Syria because the Syrian Kurds are very close to the Turkish Kurds, and Turkey sees the YPG, which is the U.S. Ba'ath forces and the backbone of the SDF, which is the ruling government of eastern Syria right now. Turkey equates those people to the PKK, which it considers Turkish terrorists. In Iraq, the Iraqi government has long tried to suppress the Iraqi Kurds. The Iraqi Kurds are led by the Peshmerga military and have been a fighting force backed by the United States in the past and protected in the past. And these are the Kurds that right now have not declared independence, but voted in a kind of quote-unquote freedom referendum for independence from Iraq, although the government hasn't moved, the Kurdish government hasn't moved for any independence from this federal or state national government. In Iran, the Iranian government has long tried to suppress the Iranian Kurds. At one point, the Iranian Kurds actually declared independence and had their own state for a very, very brief time before that state was crushed. I believe that was in the 20th century. And so they've all decided that, the danger right now is Kurdish independence, so they're all kind of banding together against it. Iran has put military on its borders and closed its borders with Iraqi Kurdistan. Turkey has sealed off airspace and has closed the borders and is threatening to shut off the pipeline from Iraqi Kurdistan. The oil pipeline, I guess, is a large portion of the income to Iraqi Kurdistan, and shutting it off would essentially embargo the oil and wouldn't leave the Iraqi Kurds with any possible way out of Iraqi Kurdistan. They would literally be landlocked and sealed in. It would be interesting to see if Turkey actually shuts off the oil from the Iraqi Kurds. It was long speculated that Turkey was allowing ISIS to smuggle oil through its borders in order for the kickbacks from it and to get cheap oil. So it would be very interesting if Turkey kind of takes the official position that we hate the Iraqi Kurds more than we hate ISIS, and what kind of ally that means the United States has in Turkey. So that this continues to be a developing story, and we'll see what happens and how close these states move together. In Syria, we have a spike of deaths. Apparently, most of these deaths are being caused by the Russian and the Syrian government, and this is because Russia has started an air campaign in the Idlib province, as well as there's a lot of bombing going on around Deir ez-Zor. Right now, in Deir ez-Zor, you have the Syrian forces backed by Russia, Iran, and Hezbollah trying to take as much territory from ISIS as possible, as the Syrian Democratic Forces, who are backed by, the YPG, the United States, and that coalition, try to take as much territory from ISIS on the other side. This is an area very rich in oil fields and energy, and so it's one like kind of the economic hubs that either of the groups will need to kind of legitimize whatever they're trying to do. The Syrian central government will certainly need this income if they hope to rebuild the country after this 6 to 7 year long civil war. It would mean a lot for Kurdish independence and autonomy if they are able to get this oil, although it could lead to another problem that the other Kurds face, which is the Kurdish population is kind of sealed off from any water, so they're kind of screwed in that measure. The recent spike in deaths has caused the Red Cross to send up some signals and say, hey guys, you're killing way too many people. Of course, the United States is still dropping a large amount of bombs on the area. I mean, the total number of deaths will probably always be unknown, like what we have in Mosul, where the city was absolutely flattened, and Patrick Coburn says 40,000 people will have been killed by the fighting in Mosul at the end of it, but, we'll never get the official numbers. Chris Woods from Air Wars, I think, said that the numbers that he heard have been between 8 and 20,000. So that would be, anywhere from a quarter to a half of what Patrick Coburn said. Again, Patrick Coburn's source is the Kurdish forces, so, everybody's kind of guessing because a lot of these bodies are just being buried in the rubble and, may never ever be found. The last note on the, war against ISIS is that we have right now the ISIS fighters doing everything they can to surrender to the Peshmerga before they surrender to the Iraqi army. I guess the Iraqi army is just carrying out summary execution of all these ISIS fighters where the Peshmerga are trying them and holding them and doing God knows what with them. So that's just kind of an interesting note and see if that story ever pops back up again. Sometimes these things happen to have consequences down the road as to, what the Peshmerga are going to do if they hold a couple thousand ISIS fighters. Moving over to Spain and the independence vote by the Catalans, we have the Catalonian government declaring independence from the Spanish government and then immediately suspending all, moves towards actually taking independence from Spain, saying they want to allow talks with the Spanish government. This seemed to be the most political move I have ever seen. I guess the president of Catalonia had no idea what to do. The poor guy has, what he believes is a mandate from his population to declare independence. He probably saw his grandma get knocked on the head on TV by a Spanish police officer and, feels like he needs to declare independence. And then at the same time, you have Spain threatening invasion and threatening to arrest him. And so he's, kind of in one of the most terrible positions a person could be in, I guess, as for being an elite ruler in the, West. And, he basically just, decides, well, I'm going to sit on the fence as hard as possible right now, saying that he wants to talk to the Spanish government. I don't think Spain is really moving from their position. I think it's kind of like, yeah, we'll talk, but, our conditions, and that's what they are. And that would be Catalonia, remaining a part of Spain. So I'm not sure what will happen there. I guess one thing I just want to touch on, and that is the 90% election results and how accurate that was. I think from everything that I've been reading and looking at, the number of Catalonians who actually support independence is far less than 90%, but is a majority. I've heard and read people speculate, in the 60s and 70s, but most of the numbers I've seen, and then based on past election results would put that number in between like 51 and 60. I think part of the reason why the voter turnout or why the results of the, election would have been so far in favor of independence was probably the people who wanted independence didn't want to get clubbed in the head, didn't want it enough, where the people who wanted independence were really emotionally for it. And, I think in both ways, people are kind of, doing a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. If you're the kind of person who really, wants independence, and if you try to go out on voting day and the thug cops are out there and you have to push your way through that, that's a big moment in history for you and your people. And that's a really cool thing to be a part of. So, maybe people were emotionally drawn to going out and voting that day and were willing to take a beating to do so. And they saw the importance of their actions, whereas people who wanted to maybe remain part of Spain, and for, real reasons, most of their family lives in Spain, they've lived in Catalonia for, a generation, but their family's historically from Spain or whatever. But they're certainly not going to go out on the streets, get beaten by a Spanish cop to go vote to remain a part of Spain. That would be a really tough thing to do. It'd take a lot of cognitive dissonance to overcome that. But it does seem that the president, I guess, by, the rules set up of the democracy, has a mandate to declare independence from Spain, and we'll see what happens going down the road. The Spanish government continues to remain firm, to threaten, and to try to lure Catalonian business away from Catalonia, lifting any restrictions or rules against locating from Catalonia to the rest of Spain. North Korea stuff. We have the CIA saying that Kim Jong-un is a rational actor with long-term interests. Bravo, CIA. Probably the only time you'll hear that on the phone and on this show, and nobody please edit out that one very short clip, but I am very excited that the CIA said this. Hopefully Trump listens. Kim Jong-un being a rational actor is very important in Trump evaluating what's going on in North Korea. If Kim Jong-un is a rational actor, then he is building these nuclear weapons solely so that the United States feels threatened enough to not attack North Korea first. That Kim Jong-un completely realizes that any nuclear war against South Korea, Japan, and the United States will result in the complete destruction of North Korea and all the North Korean people. And while they may be able to cause some devastation to maybe small regions of Japan, South Korea, and the United States, there will be South Koreans, Japanese, and Americans living the day after the war, and there will not be very many, if any, North Koreans. And so I think that, Trump knowing that Kim Jong-un knows that is very, very important to how he evaluates things. If he thinks Kim Jong-un is a madman who's getting all these nuclear weapons because Trump read some neocon, I swear, write an article in, I think was published in the Atlantic about how North Korea could possibly detonate a hydrogen bomb over Seoul and surprise all the Americans and take out all the American forces in South Korea and then launch another nuclear weapon over Tokyo and black out all of Japan and then take out all the Japanese forces and then do the same to the United States and Guam and then to the, west coast of the United States. I mean, this was completely insane. But this guy was saying, hey, North Korea could win a war here against the rest of the world, mind you. And unless North Korea is attacked first, China will not defend North Korea. And, Russia probably won't get involved either way. So, North Korea, and Kim Jong-un is a rational man, knows what he's doing. Which I believe he does. Trump doesn't have to fear North Korea attacking the United States, but, who knows what Trump believes. But, the CIA said this, so I think that's important. I think it's important that the CIA felt they had to say it too. We have this story with the Special Operation Forces in Niger. 4, I believe, dead now. They had 3 and then 1 more body was found a few days later. I guess these Special Operations Forces guys were on the ground on some kind of routine, what was apparently supposed to be a safe training mission with some of the, local regional forces or whatnot, and then were ambushed by a group of militants and, their firefight ensued. Some people got away, a lot of people died. And I don't think it's absolutely known who was responsible right now. The United States seems to at least be speculating and pointing the fingers at ISIS, although AQIM has also been accused, and that's a local Al-Qaeda affiliate there that operates in that area of Africa. Has also been a suspected culprit of the attack. From what I could tell from kind of the people that I look at on foreign policy, the consensus seems to be that a lot of the jihadists in this region are there, in part as spillover from the U.S. dethroning of Gaddafi in 2014. Also, I believe the Nigerian government has fought a somewhat effective war in driving out Boko Haram, and so some local jihadists there maybe have taken up the fight in Nigeria or joined up with ISIS or AQIM in that region. And so I guess, there are multiple explanations. I'm not exactly sure who's there, but I would look to, U.S. drone bases in the area being a part of it. The U.S. Special Operations Forces carrying out operations there being a part of it. U.S. war in Libya, the Nigerian government's war against Boko Haram. All these things may contribute to jihadists being in this region. We have some interesting stories on Saudi Arabia. We have Saudi Arabia getting closer to buying the THAAD missile systems from the United States. I believe the State Department has now approved that weapon sale. And then we have Saudi Arabia agreeing to buy the S-400 missile system from Russia. The S-400 is the same surface-to-air missile system that I believe Turkey chose to buy from Russia over the U.S. Counterpart to that system. I guess it's at least notable and interesting that both countries have chosen to buy the Russian system over the United States one, and I'm sure there's a very important reason for it. I think there's some overblown concern that Russia is trying to move closer to U.S. allies in the U.S. Coming out of the mainstream media about. I really won't worry about anything like that going on. And if they did, good, better for the U.S. anyways. Come take them, Putin. The United States will not engage in war games with Saudi Arabia, and this is largely because of Saudi's embargo against Qatar, and the United States CENTCOM in the Middle East is located in Qatar, so it's really not possible to do everything with the Saudi interference and the Saudi UAE blockade against the Qataris. A couple stories out of Yemen in that we have at least 2,000 Yemenis, including unborn babies being killed by cholera in Yemen. The education system in Yemen, especially in northern Yemen, is crumbling. Teachers haven't been paid in probably a whole year at this point, off and on. Sometimes they get paid, but the central government of Yemen was relocated from the north in Sana'a to the south in Aden, and that shut off a lot of payments to the public servants in the north. And we have that all-important bill, H.Con. Resolution 81, I believe, co-sponsored by Massey Walter Jones and a host of Democrats, trying to shut off this war in Yemen and getting a vote on this in the House. So very exciting. We're going to see a vote. People are going to have to vote on the Yemen war here, and we will see what happens. And that'll wrap up my show today, everyone. You can find the show at foreignpolicyfocus.libsyn.com, thelibertarianinstitute.org, on the Facebook page Kyle's Files. I'm on Twitter at KYAAALE. My personal website is kylesfilesblog.com. I do a daily news roundup there that's also published on libertarianinstitute.org. iTunes, rating, review, subscribe to the show there, and let me know if you want to be on, if you want the show on any other podcasters. I could certainly sign up for it. Thanks, everyone.